want to discuss another issue here, the issue of baptism in water, and whether the baptism is just symbolic or whether it serves a real purpose, being an ingredient that achieves the remission of sins or helps to achieve remission of sins, etc. And I used to believe that baptism was just a symbolic thing that people should do mainly as a way to be obedient to Christ, because there are Bible passages where Christ or his apostles tell people to get baptized. And so I felt that baptism was something that a Christian should do after he has become a Christian. But I now believe that baptism served the purpose of achieving the remission of sins, or was one of the ingredients for remission of sins. It certainly wouldn't be the only requirement. You'd have to do things other than just being baptized. But the question is whether the baptism is involved in achieving the remission of sins. I now believe that it is. I came to this position when I started wondering what the baptism would be for if it does not achieve something like remission of sins. And if it does not achieve remission of sins and plays no role in remission of sins, then I would see no purpose of having baptism aside from the goal of showing the onlookers that the person has made a profession of faith in Christ. And there is some evidence that it does meet that requirement too, that it does show the onlookers. But I got to thinking that if the goal is to show onlookers that the person has this faith in Christ, he would need to, or it would be good for him to get baptized on numerous occasions so that more and more people could see his profession of faith in Christ. It would be his way of witnessing. And also, but there's no biblical evidence of people getting these multiple baptisms as a way to show more and more people that they've achieved faith in Christ. But if it were a way to show the onlookers that the person has received his faith in Christ, then he would want to get baptized numerous times, because he would be around people who had not witnessed his original baptism. So baptisms would be a regular event. And yet there's no biblical evidence and probably no historical evidence of Christians doing this as a way to show off their faith to numerous onlookers. And there are some Bible verses which make it seem that the baptism occurred with hardly anybody around at all except for the person performing the baptism and the person getting baptized. So it would not be to convey a message to the onlookers, although it does convey a message to the onlookers if the onlookers are there. But it seems that there would be something other than conveying a message to the onlookers, that it serves some other purpose. And this gets us to certain Bible verses where it says that the baptism is for the remission of sins. Now, admittedly, this could be taken in different ways, especially in the English text, and I'm not sure about the Greek text, but it could mean that the baptism was because of the remission of sins that had already occurred, or it could mean that the baptism was because of the remission of sins that occurs at baptism. But I would say that it's because of the remission of sins that occurs at baptism, or that occur as a result of the baptism. And that's because, go back to my hypothetical about the onlookers. If the baptism is not for the remission of sin, is not to bring about the remission of sins, then the question would be, why should someone bother getting baptized? It seems that it would serve no good purpose if the person has already achieved all the remission of sins. And also, if the baptism, or if the goal were to show the onlookers that the person has professed his faith in Christ, then it seems that the person should profess his faith in Christ and wouldn't need to go through a baptism, anything like that, because it'd be much easier to just have the person profess his faith in Christ and forget about the baptism. And also, a person might get baptized even though he doesn't have this faith in Christ. He might just do that to impress somebody. And so the baptism wouldn't prove that he has faith in Christ. I think the onlookers would look for more evidence of that, because so the baptism would not achieve that goal of convincing the onlookers that the person has faith in Christ. And so I'm led to think that the baptism is for purposes other than sending a message to the onlookers. Now, some people would say that it's a way to show God that the person has faith in Christ, yet there wouldn't be a reason to show God that the person has faith in Christ. That's because he would be able to tell whether the person has this faith. You would need to see the person's baptism. Also, now once I was convinced that the baptism was one of the ingredients for obtaining remission of sins, I also looked at the issue of infant baptism. It's actually a different issue, because there are groups which say that baptism is for achieving remission of sins, and they also say that it should just be for believers, whereas other groups say that baptism should be performed on infants as well as believers. And it's important to realize at the Great Commission, when Christ said that people should become believers and also get baptized, you have the two goals of making people believers and having people get baptized. And yet Christ did not specify that it had to be in a certain order. He didn't say that the baptism had to occur after the person becomes a believer, or he really didn't address the issue of time restraints on it. And admittedly, I don't see any verses in the Bible where infants or anyone else got baptized before becoming believers. And yet, must realize that when the church started out, you wouldn't have had infants that were being raised in Christian homes, and so the new converts to the faith were people who had not had a chance to be baptized as infants or earlier on, and so all they would have had was believers' baptism, because these people had not been able to get baptized as infants because Christianity didn't exist previous to that time. So the fact that the Bible doesn't mention the infants being baptized does not rule out the possibility that the church was baptizing infants, and even if it had not baptized infants at that time, it could add that in later. Anyway, trying to use a hypothetical here, where Christ said that people should become believers, and he commanded that people be baptized, and he did not specify the order in which this would have to occur. In a way, this is like a case where a master tells the servant to do certain tasks, and the servant can obey his master by doing the tasks in whichever order comes to mind, or whenever the servant feels like it, he can choose whichever order to perform them in based on his own desires or his own circumstances. He wouldn't have to do it in a specified order unless the master specified what order the events would have to occur. And so if the master tells the servant to mow the lawn and to take out the garbage, the servant doesn't have to do it in a particular order unless the master specifies. And we could say that with Christ, when he ordered people to be believers and ordered them to be baptized. Because he didn't specify a certain order, it is quite possible to believe that the order of the events is not that the order of the events does not determine whether the event is valid or not, so that the baptism could be valid regardless of whether it occurred before or after the person becomes a believer.